When we discuss addition of integers, we're also implying the operation of subtraction. This will come up a little bit later, but addition and subtraction are inverse operations. They undo each other. We'll talk about this more when we start solving the equations. I want us to understand there are a few basic rules when we add integers. If we have a positive number and we add another positive number, that gives us a larger positive number. Similarly, if we have a negative number and we want to add another negative number to it, that's going to give us more negatives. Technically a smaller number, or you can think of it as a bigger negative number, which is a little bit of an oxymoron. More negatives when you add them together. If you add a positive and a negative, we're looking for this concept of a difference. If I have a large positive number and a negative number that has an absolute value that isn't as large, I'm going to subtract and end up with a positive number. However, if I have a positive number and I add it to a negative number that has a larger absolute value, that's going to give me a negative number left over. Let's look at some examples. Let's look at some examples of adding integers here. So if we look at these first two rules, we know that if we're adding quantities that have the same sign, we're simply going to have more of that sign. So if we have 5 plus 9 positives, we're going to end up with 14 positives. Negative 4 plus negative 8, it's like I spend $4, then I spend $8 more. Altogether, I spent $12. So negative 4 plus negative 8 is negative 12. 12 plus 7, I take 12 steps forward, then 7 more steps forward. Altogether, I took 19 steps. If I take 35 steps backwards and add negative 10 steps, 10 more steps backwards, altogether, I took 45 steps backwards. Negative 35 plus negative 10 is negative 45. Let's look at some examples now where we're adding a positive and a negative number. The signs are not the same. First thing we want to ask ourselves when we look at situations like this is, will my final evaluation be positive or negative? Again, look at whichever term has the greatest absolute value, and that lets you know if your final answer will be positive or not. In this case, we have 3 negatives. 1, 2, 3, and 5 positives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember that addition and subtraction are inverses. They create zeros. So anytime you have a positive and a negative, they cancel each other out. They make a 0. What's left? Positive 2. You can also think about this on a number line. If I'm here at 0 and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3 in the negative direction, 1, 2, 3, leaves us with positive 2. We can also start from the negative 3, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. And if we go 5 in the positive direction, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that also brings us to that 2. So these are a few ways we can think about this. 4 plus negative 7. Which has the greatest absolute value? Negative 7 has the greatest absolute value. There are more negatives here. So we know we're going to have a negative evaluation. The question is how much more? Well, we know the difference between 4 and 7 is 3. So negative 3 will be our final evaluation. If we want to see our plus minus diagram, we can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's our 7 negatives. Plus 1, 2, 3, 4 positives. Here are zeros. We have 3 negatives remaining. Now, when we start adding large numbers like this, we don't have the time and space to be making 23 or 200 pluses and minuses. So we just have to abstract what we know about our smaller numbers to make sense of what's happening here. I know that 30 has a greater absolute value than negative 23. There's more positives. I'm going to have a positive answer, and 30 take away 23 is 7. Similarly here, I see that negative 300 has a greater absolute value than 205. So I know my final evaluation is going to be negative, and there are 95 more negatives here. So 205 plus negative 300 is negative 95.